The confetti was still falling, the crowd still roaring, but Travis Kelce wasn't celebrating. He was holding back tears as he stepped up to the microphone. His hands trembled, his voice unsteady. "This isn't about football," he finally said, and the stadium fell silent. No one expected what he was about to reveal, a truth that would shake millions watching, and when he finally spoke those next words, even his toughest teammates couldn't hold back their emotions. The air was thick with celebration, yet Travis Kelce felt an unfamiliar heaviness settle in his chest. His teammates shouted, clapped, and embraced their joy, electrifying the field, but he remained still, his fingers tightening around the microphone as if anchoring himself. The confetti swirled around him, bright and chaotic, but it blurred in his vision. Heart pounded not from the adrenaline of victory, but from the weight of words he was about to speak. He cleared his throat, but no words came out at first. The stadium noise was deafening, yet in his mind there was only silence, the kind that had followed him for weeks, the kind that had made even the biggest moments feel hollow. His fingers curled slightly, gripping the mic harder as he exhaled slowly. Patrick Mahomes glanced at him from a few feet away, eyebrows slightly furrowed. "You good, bro?" he murmured, just loud enough for Travis to hear over the noise. Kelce didn't answer right away. He swallowed hard, his jaw tightening as he nodded once, but he could even say what was on his mind without breaking apart in front of thousands, the stadium, millions watching at home. The crowd was waiting. The world. He lifted the mic closer and, in a voice steadier than he expected, finally spoke. "This isn't about football." The words sent a hush through the stadium. The sea of reporters lowered their cameras just slightly, as if sensing something different. Unscripted teammates, who had been caught in their own celebrations, turned to look at him. The energy shifted, as if time itself had slowed, waiting for him to continue. Kelce blinked up at the sky for a second, gathering himself before looking back at the sea of expectant faces. "Tonight isn't just about winning," he said, his voice raw, almost hesitant. "It's about a promise I made to someone who isn't here anymore." The crowd didn't react right away. There was confusion, anticipation, and something else, an unfamiliar silence that settled over tens of thousands, people all waiting for his next words. His throat burned, his hands, usually so sure on the field, trembled slightly as he pulled something small from his pocket, a crumpled piece of paper. He unfolded it with care, smoothing out the creases as his eyes lingered on the ink. Words he had read 100 times before, but could barely bring himself to say out loud. He inhaled sharply, blinking against the bright lights. "This is for someone who believed in me more than anyone ever did," he murmured. Then, just before he began reading, his voice dropped to barely a whisper, though in the silent stadium it carried louder than any roar. "And I hope he's watching." The memory of that day clung to Travis Kelce like a shadow, even in this moment of triumph, the cheers, flashing lights, the overwhelming energy of a Super Bowl victory. None of it could drown out the quiet voice that echoed in his mind. Ethan's voice, the boy who had sat across from him months ago, eyes gleaming with a passion so pure it had reminded Travis of why he loved this game in the first place. He could still see him sitting at the edge of his hospital bed, fingers absent-mindedly tracing the Chiefs logo on his blanket, body frail, but spirit unshaken. They had talked for hours about football, about life, how the game made everything else feel small. For a while, Ethan had laughed when Travis told him about his pre-game superstitions, shaking his head and saying, "You really think wearing the same socks every game is helping you win?" Travis had grinned back, then ruffling the kid's hair, "Hey, don't mess with the routine. It's working, isn't it?" Ethan had smiled, but there had been something in his eyes, something unspoken, and just before Travis left that day, Ethan had reached for his wrist, gripping it tighter than his small hands should have been able to. "Promise me you'll make it to the Super Bowl this year. I want to see you win." That moment had stayed with him, burned into his mind as clearly any touchdown play he had ever run. Promised he had meant it, and yet a few weeks before the playoffs call had come a quiet, shaky voice on the other end, Ethan's mother. "He fought hard, Travis, but he's gone." The words had hit harder than any tackle. Travis had sat there, gripping his phone, staring at the floor as the noise around him blurred into nothing. He had wanted to say something, anything, but no words had felt right now. Standing here, trophy in hand, confetti swirling at his feet, he felt the weight of that promise more than ever. This win wasn't just for the team, it wasn't for the fans, it was for Ethan. Dream he never got to see come true. Travis swallowed hard, his fingers brushing against his pocket. Inside, crumpled but safely kept, was the last letter Ethan had written to him, the letter that had arrived just days before the Super Bowl, the one he hadn't been able to bring himself read until now. The roar of the stadium felt distant, almost muted, as Travis Kelce stood on the field, his chest rising and falling with deep measured breaths. Sweat clung to his skin despite the cool night air, and the scent of turf mixed with sharp bite of adrenaline still coursing through his veins. The game had been brutal, every second a battle, but now that it was over, now that they had won, it didn't feel the way he had imagined. He had pictured this moment before countless times, the celebration, euphoria, the undeniable proof that they were the best, but instead of pure elation there was a tightness in his throat, a weight in his heart that no victory could shake. He had done it, they had done it, and yet the one person he wanted to see in the crowd, one face he had promised he would make proud, wasn't there? His mind flashed back to the game, to the moments when exhaustion clawed at his limbs, when doubt threatened to creep in every time he had faltered. He had heard Ethan's voice in his head, "You got this, Kelce." One more play, it had pushed him forward, kept standing. When his body begged to fall, even as defenders closed in, even the pressure mounted, that small voice had been louder than the crowd, the fear of failure. Now, standing beneath the blinding lights, he reached into his pocket and felt the crumpled edges of the letter Ethan had written him. His fingers trembled slightly as he traced the creases, knowing the words inside had been written with a belief so strong it had outlived the boy himself.